Thank you all for joining us. As I mentioned before, there's a couple of you that came in later, so I'm just going to repeat myself. I'm acting as the host today. My name's Jay Woodworth. I work for Provincial as the Christmas tree specialist, for those of you who are new to this or haven't seen me before. I have a panelist with me today, so he's going to be our guest speaker. This is Corey Roberts, and I think they can see you, Corey, so you can wave.
Everyone.
Yeah. All right, those of you who are acting as attendees on this, because we have it set up as a webinar, we can't actually see you, but we are going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you want to post questions during the presentation there, I'll watch it and try to answer them or shoot them to Corey so that he can give them a try too. So this is my introduction to the Lunch Break Technical Series. We started these off in January, and they started as just a request to have a discussion between Christmas tree growers around the province, and they've evolved a little bit. So now this is our 4th or 5th discussion topic, and we've been posting them to a YouTube channel and trying to keep as much discussion in them as possible. So we have this technical series the last Tuesday of every month, and sometimes we throw in extra ones, especially with everybody working from home right now and not being able to get out to the field and offer support as often. So lunch breaks, they'll normally follow an introduction to what the seminar is. I usually have a brief presentation just to give some background, and then we usually head right into roundtable discussion and an open discussion so that everybody gets a chance to tell their stories, to voice some of their experiences, talk about what went right and what went wrong in their lots. And I think that's part of the value in these seminars to begin with. So these sessions will always be held over the noon hour, so they're noon to 1 p.m. If you're not on the mailing list, but you would like to be or you want to share with your friends, you can contact Brittany at the Christmas Tree Council, and her email's right there. And the sessions are also recorded, so that's the link there to the bottom of the YouTube channel, and if you reach out to Brittany, she'll be able to share that with you as well. So today's topic, we're going to do Navigating Provincial Landscape Viewer. So as I mentioned, we have a guest speaker, Corey Roberts. He's an environmental farm planner at the Federation of Agriculture located there in East Mountain outside of Truro. Again, my name is Jay. I work as the Christmas tree specialist at Perennia. So this little presentation, I'm going to give you a quick introduction, talk about some of the applications, and then I'm going to hand it off to Corey to do those last 2 sections. Provincial Landscape Viewer, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's an online tool, so you can get to it just from Google searching Nova Scotia Provincial Landscape Viewer. It's a map-based tool, so you are able to incorporate different layers. And this is important because as landowners, you have a responsibility to meet these outcomes. So this is just another tool to use in the toolbox that can help you make decisions based on sustainability, efficiency, stewardship, and really it's just a good mapping application that's a free software to use for the province. The applications are widespread, but as a landowner, some of the applications that I like to recommend using it for, it can show you where your water courses are. You can do different measurements on it. You can look at your PID numbers. There's a lot of different applications if you get into playing with the tool. So I think it's important that we spend most of today's presentation doing the demonstration so you can see all the different features, but I just want you to keep in mind that it has a lot of different applications. So some of the data that it's included there, like I said, it's done by the Lands and Forestry. So there is forestry data on there. There's wildlife data. It can show you where the moose corridors are, for example. It'll show you where there's a lot of deer present, that kind of thing. You can look at wetlands, and it will break down wetlands into swamps and bogs. You can even look at drainage on the land. It'll show you crown land, protected areas, all your PID numbers. And this is definitely not a fully inclusive list, but this is just some of the basic examples of what this tool can do for you. So I'm going to go back to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let Corey take over and take you through a pretty good demonstration of how it works. And then he's also going to bring up a site and show you a case study and show you some of the features and how you might use that for your lot.
Hello, everyone. As Jay mentioned, my name is Corey Roberts, and I'm an environmental farm plan coordinator with the Federation of Agriculture. And I've been working with the Provincial Landscape Viewer here for a number of years, and as a user primarily. And this will be my first shot at trying to impart some of the technology to others. So first time teaching it, so hopefully you can bear with me. But yeah, it's a pretty powerful tool, and hopefully by the end of this, I mean, we're not going to be able to dip into every aspect of it because there are some more advanced features that wouldn't be well suited to dealing with in an hour-long seminar. But I think we can probably scratch the surface pretty good to the point where you could dig in and start using it. So I think it's fairly straightforward if you have any kind of experience working with computers at all. Like it's well laid out and it seems to work pretty good. I'm hoping that today that we're not going to run into too many internet bandwidth issues, and if we do, just bear with us. Sometimes it lags a little bit when we zoom in or zoom out or whatnot. Yeah, so I guess Jay's already said what the plan is here, but essentially I'm just going to go through the levers and buttons on the Provincial Landscape Viewer, describe them all relatively briefly, show a little bit about what it can do, and then we'll try and kind of look at a more or less real world example of what you might be interested in doing in it as a case study. So we'll try that. The first thing I want to point everyone to is, well, Jay mentioned it, you can Google Provincial Landscape Viewer, or you can see the URL up here. You might want to take note of that if you're not able to find it in the top few hits of Google. But generally it's pretty close to the top of the list. This is what it looks like when you first come to the Provincial Landscape Viewer page. You see the entire province there. And I'm going to point out initially this help feature here, which I think is pretty good. So there's no real notes from this session here today that you'll be able to refer to, but there's really no need for them because this help feature is pretty robust. And you can see that everything that we're going to be doing today is explained in pretty good detail in here. So I recommend that you refer to this help as needed after this session to kind of review some of the things we've talked about. Okay, so the Provincial Landscape Viewer is a mapping tool developed by Lands and Forests to provide easy access to ecological landscape data, along with forestry and wildlife information for natural resource planning and management. Yeah. Okay, so I think I'll jump right in and just kind of give a brief overview of the features. Now, when I click on this help tab, is my screen switching to the help view? Jay, can you comment on that? You can see that help currently?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll zoom in on this guy a little bit here, but this basically shows the various different components of the landscape viewer. It's organized with icons along the left-hand side and then a few icons along the top right. Your navigation buttons are located in the top left of the screen here, the plus, minus, the home, and the location button. And then there's a search icon, a draw and measure icon, an address locator icon, a list of various layers that you can add. There's a map scale, which changes as you zoom in and out so that you know the approximate scale of your map. Coordinates in degrees. Then up top, there's a legend button. So for the various layers that you've got selected on your screen, the legend entries will be in that tab. If you're working on multiple areas of the map, you can bookmark an area so that you can quickly navigate back to it. Here's base maps, and these are, we're going to go into these in more detail, but you can put a topographical map in there or aerial imagery, etc. And then you have the option of printing your final product, your map, and you can either print that to a printer or to a PDF file, and we're going to do that as part of the case study. These last two icons on the upper menu bar are more or less advanced. I consider those to be advanced features where you can import information into the provincial landscape viewer from your own data, or you can export data from it. And that this today's seminar, we're not going to get into that, so we'll ignore those guys. All right. Now my scale's gone off here, so I'm going to try and get that back. There we go. So the navigation keys are the first ones we're going to talk about, and my map disappeared somehow, so I'm going to hit this home button. That's and anytime that you are zoomed in to the map or zoomed way out of the map, to get back to the kind of provincial extent, you just hit that home button. And for one reason or another, there we go. I think that's working. All right, so that's what the home button does there. It always brings you back to the kind of provincial scale. Now these buttons up here are zoom in and zoom out. And wherever the map is centered is where the map will zoom into and where it will zoom out from. So Truro is more or less in the center of the map here. So if we hit the zoom in button, and there will be a small lag there, you can see we're starting to zoom in on Truro. I hit it again, and we're getting closer. And you'll see in these maps here that as part of this program, as you get closer in, zoom further in, the details within the map increase. We'll zoom in again. So that's one way of zooming in on the map. And likewise, you can zoom out using the negative button. There's another method of zooming into the map that can be a little bit more useful. It doesn't require you to have the area you want to zoom in centered in the center of the screen. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to take a closer look at Oxford. I could hold down my Shift key on my keyboard, then click my left mouse button while holding the Shift key and draw a box around Oxford, and then release. And hopefully, there we go. Took a second there, but now we're zoomed in a little bit closer. I can do the same thing again, hold down that Shift key, left mouse button, drag, and bring Oxford even closer into zoom. There we go. And clearly I've got the property layer already selected here, so I'm just gonna skip ahead and deselect that for the time being. Okay, so that's zooming in and zooming out. I'm gonna zoom back out to the provincial scale here. If you happen to have location enabled on your computer, you can click this button, which will zoom into the location where you actually are. My computer doesn't have that enabled, so if I click that, nothing happens. So, but that's what that button does. It takes you to where you actually physically are located. Alrighty. Okay, one additional way to navigate on this map, and that is, I didn't mention this earlier, but if you just simply click your left mouse button, you can drag the map any way you want. So that's just a simple left click of the mouse button. And then the last way to navigate on this map is to steer your cursor over where you want to zoom into. So let's say Port Hawkesbury, and now I can just roll my mouse wheel forward. And I just did that, and it'll probably take a second to draw the new map, but there you go. So by rolling the mouse forward with my cursor over the point I want to zoom in on, that's a pretty efficient way of zooming in and zooming out, because I can also roll my mouse button the other direction backwards, which will zoom me back out again. Okay. So Alrighty. So we talked about the ability to have various different base maps. This is the base map icon up here. So if I click on that, up comes a list of various different potential base maps. And as we zoom in, I think you noticed as we zoomed into Truro and Oxford and Port Hawkesbury that the map was kind of by default on the topographical map, so the Nova Scotia topo map. But if I was interested in kind of aerial photography, which might be more useful from a land use planning perspective, then I could click that and you can see that the province is covered by a mosaic of various different imagery. And likewise, if I was more interested in roads, I could click on the roads base map. So we will, for the sake of today's exercise, click on Nova Scotia imagery. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the various layers that we're able to use in the Provincial Landscape Viewer. So this is the layer icon here, and you can see it is just the icon is in fact a bunch of layers on top of one another. So if you were to click that, up comes the layer box, and you can expand these and move them around as you see fit. And you can see that there are 6 primary categories of layers here, all of which are currently unselected. And if you want to see the kind of subcategories under each of these main categories, you can click on these little arrows here, and down will come additional categories. So under Nova Scotia roads, you can see there's addressed, well, I'm guessing that's addressed roads. And then there's additional subcategories to that. So if you click on that, you can see if you just want to look at Trans-Canada Highway, various highways, arterial highways, etc., they're all in there. And I'll say that this now, and that is, if you see any items that are in these lists that are kind of gray relative to their neighbors, which are black, the implication there being that the grayed out items are only visible at certain scales. So we're zoomed way out currently. So if I were to click on this collector highway map, then the scale is too small for us to be able to see that. So as we zoomed in, that would become black and we'd be able to see it. So if we wanted to select some layers, well, let's just look at a couple layers. Again, we looked at the roads layer, but let's look at the forestry layer here. If I click on that, 2 sub layers come up, forestry or ecological land classification. And if I click on forestry again, there's again a bunch of additional sub layers. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here is if I was interested in seeing land cover, for instance, and I clicked on it, you need to also click on all the categories above it within that hierarchy in order for that to show up. So I would have to click on forestry to enable all of this, then the subheading called forestry to enable all these, then the individual sub category here as well. If any of those 3 aren't clicked, the layer won't show up. Now, if I expand this even further, now I'm getting into a situation where there's no more subcategories underneath this one. So it just shows the legend items for that particular subcategory. So you can see land cover subcategories are hardwood, mixed wood, softwood, etc. So when we actually put this layer on, those are the colors that are going to show up on the map over the map items that represent those various different features. Okay, so the two layers that I would like to select are going to be the property layer, and I'm going to make sure that sub heading is also selected. And under forestry, I will select that land cover layer. Okay, so that's done. So now let's look how that shows up on the map. And I am going to zoom in to an area of the province here. Okay, oh, there we go. And that's a lot of information there. So we are seeing the land use items, and property is selected, but it's not showing up. So why is that? Could be two reasons. It could be that our scale is too big for it to show up, or it could be that the land use layer is over top of the property layer. So let's see what the deal is there. So we'll click on that. The manner in which the layers exist in this list implies who's on top of the other, right? So because property is first in the list, highest up in the list, that means that it is on top of the forestry layer. So it will overwrite the forestry layer. So we should be able to see the properties on top of that forestry layer. Now, the fact that we can't see the properties implies that we are scaled up too high. So let's zoom in. I just click the zoom in button. I'll click it again. And I'll click it again. That's the other thing about this provincial landscape viewer. The more information you're asking it to put on the screen at any one time increases the lag time, because it needs to download that information and place it on the screen and that sort of thing. So to the extent that you're able to, working with smaller areas is going to be more useful to you, and it'll be more efficient. Let me just see here. I will zoom in to this region here. I just got a pop-up on my computer saying that my internet is slow. So that may be the reason why we're struggling here. Oh, there we go. Took a while for that to zoom in there. Okay, so you can see the property layer. I almost dare not zoom out. I'd like to zoom out one layer here. I'm going to try that. Zoom out one. You can see the individual property items, and then the land use kind of superimposed over top of that. Now, we had that base layer on there, which was the forested, well, I mean, the aerial imagery, which showed, you know, all the land use imagery. So having this land use layer kind of pasted over top of that is kind of a little bit, it takes away from our information. So one of the things that we can do in here is change the transparency of the various layers. So if we wanted to be able to see what was going on underneath that layer, in the 6 main categories in the layer list, these little drop-down menus on the right-hand side here. You can only do it on the top 6 primary items, but if I was to click on that, one of the items that comes available to me is called transparency. So I can click on that, and you see a little slider shows up anywhere from 0%, i.e., you know, opaque, to 100%, which is completely transparent. So you can slide that, and you can start to be able to adjust your opacity of that layer so that you can still make out the features that lie below that layer. So that's a useful thing, especially when you're layering more than one layer on top of each other. So we'll call that 50 or 60% opaque. So there you go. We've put a couple layers in, and we have changed the transparency of the layer. As you move around the map, you can see that the layers show up everywhere you go. Now, another interesting feature of the PLV is that you can just simply click on any layer or any item on your on the map, and it will give you more information. So let's just do that right now. I'm just going to click my mouse, left click. Boom. Up comes this polygon, which shows this land cover element. And there's a code that comes up, a land cover species code. I'm not familiar with what those codes are, but someone in the forestry world would know that. And the documentation that exists in the help file would likely help you find out what that implied. But it shows the acreage, or how many hectares it is, the, I'm gonna struggle to say that word, but merchantable volume in cubic meters per hectare, the height, etc. But given the fact that we've got 2 layers currently selected here, both the land use layer and the property layer, you can see here in the top left, it's saying that we're looking at one of 2 features that were in the area where I clicked. So if I were to hit this triangle here, it will cycle to the next feature, which is the actual property or PID number that particular feature exists inside of. And if I were to zoom out a little bit, we'd be able to see that property a little bit better. And you can see that the property ID number is right there. I realize that I'm covering a lot of stuff here, and for some of you that may be slightly too fast or too slow, but any questions you guys have, please just enter them in the chat room, and I'll try and address or clarify anything that I'm talking about here. So we'll click on this guy. Same thing. You get 2 different items. You get your land cover information and your PID information. The PID is the same. The property or the parcel ID number is the same for that unit. Okay. So what are some of the other features here? So we've got the various different layers. And as Jay mentioned initially, I mean, there's quite a number of different layers in here. So you can play with all the various different layers and see what is most pertinent to your situation there. One of the other features is the search bar, or the search icon here. So if I click on search, I have this menu comes up, and I have the ability to search a couple of different ways. You can see here there's tabs along the top. There's search by shape, search by value, and then the results of my search. So only certain elements of the data within the Provincial Landscape Viewer are searchable, but they all exist in this drop-down box here. So if, well, click it, You can search the eco district and eco element, eco district and eco section, wetlands, vegetation, and property. So I'm going to click property, and I'm going to click by shape or search by shape, and I'll do a couple of different ways to show you the various different types. So let's say I'm interested in a specific property. I've identified a property and I want to know more about it. So I want to select it by a point. So that's what this fella does right here. If I click on him, he's highlighted now. And so I can take my cursor out onto the map and I can identify a specific property. Now, I had a few troubles doing this earlier because I think it really expects you to double click very quickly in order to achieve this. So I was having a few issues earlier because double clicking on the map also is another way of zooming into the map, but it's asking you to double click in order to put a point on the map, but I think it's asking you to double click more quickly. So we'll see if it works here, but I'm gonna double click. Okay, it worked.
Corey, I've got a question in the chat box.
So I clicked on that. Sure, absolutely.
All right. They ask, can the forestry legend be shown while the layers are visible?
Ah, yes. Let me demonstrate that. Okay, so anytime that you've got layers selected, this legend icon up here will have all the various different items that exist that are currently selected. So if I click on that, you can see that we've got our property icon, which is just a purple outline, and then all the forestry units are in the legend as well. So anything that's selected will exist in this legend. Any of the layers that are selected will be in here. Now, one of the things I mentioned too is if you are playing with the transparency of the various layers, I was going to say that these colors don't change to match the change in transparency, but I think I might be wrong in saying that. In fact, it looks to me as though these are, fairly muted relative to the original ones. So I think it does actually change the color as you change the transparency. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. So yes, I selected a PID using a point selection, and so I used this feature here. I selected property. I said I want to select it by a point. I went to the map and I selected it, and the results ended up in my results table here in this tab. Now, if I click on this guy, he becomes highlighted in blue, and then that little pop-up shows me the PID number of that property. If I'm interested in getting more information or zooming into that property, I can click on the zoom to, and that will kind of bring it up to the full scale of the map. And yeah, so that's how you select by a point. Now, there may be a circumstance where you want to select multiple properties by a shape, or by that matter, by a line. Let's say there's a railroad going through a series of different properties. You want to follow the railroad and understand how many properties are bordering the railroad. So you could select the line. We're still looking at the properties, and I can draw a line from here to here. And okay, it's kind of hard to see now. The highlighted properties are actually a slightly different pink color now, but you can see in my results tab, all those properties that I just selected showed up. And if while reviewing them, I decide that this one is not relevant to what I'm looking at, then I can delete it from my list. And so there we go. I can click on the individual properties and take a look at them. yeah, so that's another way to select them, by line. And you can do it by a rectangle, by a circle, by a polyline, or a line with multiple segments to it, or a polygon. So that might be a useful one to try out. So I can draw a interesting shape. And then when I'm ready to finish my shape, I can double click, and then it will select all properties that were within that polygon. Now, another thing to keep in mind here on this search menu is this drop down here allows you to just kind of iterate. If you have this selected, create new results, it will only select those features that you select in that particular search query. If you would like to search for a property, search for another property, search for another property, and have them all kind of listed, then you say add to current results, and you change that to the little plus sign. So you can, as an example, we can say, okay, we're going to use a line. I'm going to select those two properties. Okay, I'm going to clear the lists to start with. I'm going to select these two properties with a line. So I've got two properties. Now I'm going to go back to select by shape. I'm going to change this to the little plus tab on there, add to current results. So now when I select another property, or two or three, it will just simply add those to the existing list. So you can kind of pick and choose around and add multiple properties to the list. So I'm going to just zoom in, or not zoom in. I'm going to deselect my line selection tool. I'm just going to click on this guy, and I'm going to write down that PID number, 25131376. So now, let's say, for instance, you had a PID number and you wanted to find a property based on a PID number. Well, instead of searching by shape, you come over here to search by value. And likewise, in the drop-down menu, you say, I want to select properties, and you need to enter your PID number. So I'm going to go to my results. I'm going to clear all the results that are in there. And now I'm going to go back to select search by value. I'm searching for properties, and I'm going to enter that PID number. Search. And two results come up for the same PID. If I click on it, yeah, so it's two individual polygons, but they have the same PID number, so they both come up. So that's the search feature. There's plenty of other things you can search for, as we mentioned: wetlands, vegetation, various different ecological districts. But it's a pretty powerful tool within the PLB. And then I guess the other thing that I want to show you is the draw feature. That's this icon over here. Now you can draw on your map. And let's say, for instance, we'll zoom in here. Oh, yeah, we'll zoom in a little bit. And let's say, for instance, we just simply wanted to put an image on the map for making our map. We can do points, we can do lines, we can do polylines, triangles, rectangles, circles, anything we want. We can do text if we want to. And the nice thing about this drawing, it's not only just drawing, but it's also measurement as well. So let's pick a line, and we can decide what color we want the line to be. We can decide how thick we want the line to be, whether we want it to be completely transparent or very opaque, the thickness of the line. And here's the other bonus, and that is you can click this button here, which says show measurements. We're going to draw a line, shows measurements. As soon as we do that, up comes a couple of more boxes, or a single box for a line, and it says, what do we want to measure our units of distance in? And so I'm going to say, I don't know, meters. And now I'm interested to know, how far is it from the northeast corner of this property to the southwest corner of this property? For one reason or another, that's what I want to find out. So I just click, left click, hold the mouse down, drag that line from one corner to the other, release, and now I know that that distance is 1.3 kilometers, or 1,328 meters. Okay, so you could do that with area as well. So you can select a polyline, for instance, or a polygon rather. Let's do, I don't know, purple. And it's currently set at about 50% transparency, so we'll still be able to see through it. We'll set that a little bit higher. We're going to show the measurements. Now with a polygon, you have two different measurements. With a line, you've just got one. It's how long is the line. With the polygon, you have both an area and a distance, and the distance would be around the outside of the polygon. So let's say we're interested in determining how many acres that property is. So we'll say acres, and how many kilometers or meters of perimeter. I'm mixing my imperial units here, but okay. So we can click, and then at each point that we want to add, we click again. Oh, I didn't grab that. Okay, and we click again, and we double click this time, and that will finish off the polygon. There we go. And unfortunately, the acreage was just overlaid by the length of the previous line, so it's hard to read that, but it does say 104.2 acres. And so I guess that's something to be aware of when you're doing this as well, is that there's not a lot of flexibility around where those labels pop up on there. So I can undo that if I want to just go back to that line, and maybe I'll be able to undo that guy as well. And then I'll try my polygon again. I think I need to select him again. Yeah. I'll just do it quickly here. Oops, didn't grab that corner. And again, double click to finish it. You single click at each corner and then double click to finish it. There we go. 103 acres, and the perimeter is 2,988 meters. So that can be useful for determining the individual areas for different land uses, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, all right. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I guess I think I've covered off the majority of the features. There's one more feature here that I haven't talked about, but we're going to use that in the case study anyway, so maybe I'll just leave that for there. But again, I guess my thought with this case study would be, like, when would this tool be useful to you? And I'm thinking, let's say you find out about a property and you're interested in learning more about it. It's too far away to go and travel and walk the property, or maybe it's the middle of the winter time, or whatever. You want to get more information before you decide what you're going to do. So all you have is a civic address, and that's it. So you want to find out some more information about this place. So what are we going to do? Let's turn off our layers for the time being here. And that guy, we can clear that guy out as well. Clear, there we go. So this tool here is called Locate by Address or Coordinate. I click on that. Now, I guess that's something that I hadn't discussed earlier either, and I should jump back to that. But down at the bottom here, there is a coordinate box that shows your degrees, longitude and latitude. And you can see as you move your cursor, things are changing in the X and Y axis here. There is a tiny little button off to the left-hand side of that box. And if you click it, now all of a sudden it turns blue. And when I go to click on a specific item, boom, up comes a pin. And I'm going to close that. And now you can see that that is the coordinates of that particular point, which could be useful. All right. Now, the property that we want to find, all we have is an address for it. So I'm going to go over here to Locate by Address or Coordinate under the address section here. And the address of the property is 113 Canada Road in Middle Musquodoboit. Let's see if we can find that. Oh, one search result, up it comes, and we'll click on it. So this is the property. I'm going to change it, put the property tab back on so we can see the individual properties here. There we go. So now we have a PID number, 00618629. Okay, so we were able to find the property in question based on a civic address search. Now, civic address isn't going to work for every property because not every property has a civic address. But if you are able to get the PID number, then you can do something very similar. You can just search by, well, you can search, well, as we did earlier, under the search tab by value, property, and then we can just enter that PID number into there, 00618629, and there we go. Now, another feature of this locate by address or coordinate is this inspector. Now, if you click on this icon here and click on an area, on a road specifically, then it will actually spit out a civic address for you. So if you ever want to find the civic address or a close approximation of the civic address for a given property, then you can actually use this inspector to find it. So that's another useful feature in the PLV. Okay, so here we are. We've got our property here, and what do we want to do? We want to determine, I just zoomed in, and the property just property layer kind of disappeared on me. But essentially there, we got to zoom out again a little bit. The property has a mix of some pasture land, some forested land, and some Christmas tree land. And we want to determine the acreages of that land. We also want to know whether or not there's any water courses on the property. We want to know if there's any wetlands on the property. We think that there might be a well on the property, so we want to add a label to that and identify that. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll start by seeing if there are wetlands on the property. So we're going to go to our layers tab, and the wetlands actually are under wildlife. So we'll select wildlife, and under that you can see wetlands. And under the wetlands tab, you have the choice between like wetland vegetation or wetlands proper. So I'm going to just select wetlands. And now we can take a zoom out a little bit, and we can see that there are no wetlands on this property as per the provincial wetlands map, but there is a wetland off to the southeast there. And if I click on that, oh, you know what? I've still got my address locator selected there, so that's why I tried to do that. I will unclick that guy and close that down, and I should be able to click on that. Yeah, so there we go. There's a swamp, a 2.2 hectare swamp to the southeast of the property, but no wetlands according to this map on the property. Okay, so wetlands was taken care of. Now we want to look at water courses. Are there water courses on the property? Back to the layer list. We're going to unselect the wetlands. The water course layer is actually on the forestry tab, and it is under forestry. I don't want land cover necessarily. And this layer here is called WAM predicted flow, which is essentially the wet areas mapping predicted flow, and it's kind of it's a water course layer. So we select that, and recall that the top item in the list has to be selected in order for anything underneath it to show up. So we got to click that too. And now you can see on our map, we see there is a brook running through the property in 2 different areas. So that's good information. So we got that. Now we want to see how much land we have in agriculture. So we're going to go to our drawing tool again. We're going to select our polygon. We're going to select green. We want to measure the number of acres and the perimeter in meters. And so we're just going to go ahead and start mapping that out. And this isn't going to be perfect, but you could do a better job if you had more time. And you double click to finish it off. Okay, 4.7 acres, 772 meters in perimeter. Okay, so next, this is a little block of Christmas trees in the corner here. So I want to know how many acres of Christmas trees are on the property. And let's see here. Oh, yeah, I might change that to being slightly transparent. The Christmas trees will be orange. And same measurements. Oops. I gotta reselect my polygon tool. And I didn't do a particularly good job there either, but missed a little corner, but oh, there we go. It's 1.6 acres of Christmas trees in there. And we could do the same thing for the forested area, but I see that our time is running out here, so I'm not going to do that for the time being. But I will say this, you can do, let's say you wanted to do I'm seeing a little feature right here, which I think might be a well. So I want to identify that on my map. So I'm going to select this fella right here, a point selection, and I'm going to pick a particular icon that I'm interested in using, and I can stick him on there, and then I might put a label on there as well, and the label is going to say well, and I want it to be white so it shows up on the background a little bit better. And there we go. We're going to say well, and we do that. And now, as a final thing, we did this already once, but we're going to do it again here. We're going to draw a line to see, kind of just gauge a general sense of what is the closest that our Christmas tree production is to our watercourse here. And that might be of interest to us from an agricultural perspective if we're applying pesticides or fertilizer, that sort of thing. And this looks like a pretty good separation distance here, but it's foreseeable, something that might be of interest to a producer. So we're going to select the line. We're going to say green is fine. And we're going to show the measurements in meters, and we're going to take the point that we consider to be approximately the closest of the Christmas trees to the brook. And, oh, there we go. And that's 29.7 meters. All righty. So we've done quite a bit of analysis in a pretty short amount of time, and we're pretty proud of our work. So we want to save this and up as a map. So I'm going to zoom out a little, and up here in the right hand corner you can see this print feature here. So we're going to click on print. Up comes a menu. You can change the title of the map. It just has to think for a second here. So property map. How do we want to lay this out? We can pick various different paper sizes and whatnot, but I'm going to pick map only. We want the format to be PDF, but you can select a JPEG or a GIF image or various other things, but PDF might not be a bad one. And there's one feature on the advanced tab here that I think is worthwhile doing, and that is we want to preserve the map extent, and that means regardless of the shape of the PDF, we want the entire map that we've got showing here in our document. So we have to click preserve map extent, and then that's it. So now we hit print. You can see that it's generating a PDF here. And when it's finished doing its thing, then you have the option of clicking on that, downloading it to your computer, and then you've got it saved. The other thing that I will quickly show you is the fact that there's this bookmark tab here as well. And if you click on the bookmark, you can add a bookmark name called My Map. So if I go to Truro, which is another bookmark, too many things going on at once here. It's trying to create a PDF while I'm trying to scoot all over the place, but there we go. There's Truro. And now if I click My Map, it should take us right back to where we were before. So exactly. So I think here we are at 1 o'clock, so time flies, but that's where I'll leave it. Unless there's any additional questions. You really dig in and start playing with it, it'd probably become a little bit more obvious to you. If all that I did today was to just demonstrate some of the things that are possible with the landscape viewer, I'm confident that if you kind of dip into it and just start playing with it, you'll become quite good at it very quickly, especially if you kind of lean on that help file a little bit, which is quite good.
Our next session is going to be May 26th, same place, same time. Again, if you want the link for that, you can email Brittany. Her email is outreach@ctcns.com. And she will keep sending out the links to you, and you'll be able to see the topics. And again, those are advertised in the Christmas Tree Journal as well. So I'm just going to leave the line open for a minute, but if you don't have any questions, you're welcome to take off. Thank you for joining us.